Okay, I think we're ready to get going. So the first thing I want to just say to everyone is thank you on the West Coast for joining this morning. And for the East Coast, thank you for taking the time during your lunch to join us for today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items that we'll take note of today is that all of your mics will be on mute, cameras will be off, and there is a Q&A feature within Zoom at the bottom of your screen that you can ask questions if you like. Derek on the Damotech team will be answering questions while you pose them during the course of the presentation. And also if there's any questions that you want, we can also answer at the end as well. So today's webinar is entitled "The National Retail Chain Saves $10 Million a Year in Maintenance Costs." And it's really a case study. And what's important to put into context about today's case study is not only that the retail chain saved $10 million a year in maintenance costs, but it also increased employees' safety while doing so. So there's really a double benefit to this. And we're going to go into depth during our presentation today to tell you about how they did that. Our speakers for today are myself, Business Development Manager. My name is Jonathan Zell. And as well, we have Mark Rousseau, who heads up National Accounts and Strategic Partnerships at Damotech. So a little bit about Damotech, who we are and what we do. For the past 30 years, Damotech has been the largest provider of rack safety solutions in North America. And there are a bunch of services that Damotech offers. The first being engineering services, where our core of engineers can do third-party audits that consist of conformity inspections, load capacity calculations, and can even offer rack safety training courses. Another proponent or another thing that Damotech can do as well is have a suite of safety products. So we have a suite of rack repair solutions that have a lifetime warranty, as well as a suite of rack protection products as well. And lastly, this is all tied together through the Damotech web platform, which allows you to track your warehouse safety virtually anywhere in the world. It allows you to upload and take pictures of the damage in real time and see the state of either one of your warehouses or multiple warehouses in a single view. One thing to put into context is the importance of safety. And one of the things we found out through our research is that it costs more than $84 million a week in the US. Injuries cost more than $84 million per week in the US. And that doesn't even take into account the fines that OSHA can put on those, as well as the fact of the operational inefficiencies that costs. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to Mark, who's going to take us through our case study for today.
Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate it. So let's get to the crux of today's presentation. John opened up with the fact that this is a case study. So we're going to roll through this in sequence so you understand what our customer was up against, how we help the situation, and at the end of the day, how this all resulted in some considerable benefit. Now, many of you may be wondering, why we haven't talked about the customer's name. I think many of you or most of you who have worked in business long enough, you understand that NDAs and confidentiality agreements oftentimes prevent us from being able to use the customer's name. So we won't be able to, unfortunately, but I promise you the data that we're going to be talking about today is from a real situation, and that it's pertinent, and that this is precisely what happened to this particular customer. I can say that it's a Fortune 500, and if you could imagine, as you look at this slide before you, we were dealing with a national retail chain, 1,500 locations spread throughout the US. And it's important to know that it's a public setting. And I mean that by as customers are going up and down the aisles, looking at product, the aisles have racking in them. So there's an immense amount of scrutiny that comes with having that kind of public setting. This particular customer had frequent rack damage, both in the areas that were visible to the public, as well as areas were just visible or operated by folks, say, in receiving or in the shipping area. It goes without saying that, unfortunately, rack safety was not a priority for this particular customer. It's something that they did almost as a needing to do. Hey, corporate tells me I should be doing something, but there was really no thorough process behind their rack safety program. And then maybe before going further, I know many of you who have joined today, the likelihood is that you don't have 1,500 locations to contend with, or that you may not be saving the amount of dollars that we're going to be speaking to today. But I promise you that these particular elements will apply to your particular situation. So we talked about how rack safety was not a priority. Well, what kind of started this whole thing was the fact that there was an accident. There was repeated damage, and I spoke to that in the previous slide. That repeated damage, along with the fact that the rack was overloaded, caused there to be a local collapse of some racking, and there was an injury that ensued. And as with everything in the United States, as there's a work-related injury, especially when you're a customer of this size, the injury had to be reported to OSHA. So OSHA got involved, and we all know what flows from thereafter. Now, like every large organization, even some small ones, but there's a reaction that we must take. So OSHA not only demanded that there be a plan put in place, but that this Fortune 500 company took it upon itself to ensure that the elements that went wrong were not going to be repeated. So they went off and performed a very, very structured vetting process for a vendor to come and perform a third-party audit. And as with every process, and this took about 18 months. I mean, if I remember when we went through this, we went through, I want to say, a dozen pilot inspections for some of their locations. So it was a very, very thorough process looking at a multitude of elements. Now, what happened is that sourcing got involved, and I think for those of us who've been around long enough, when sourcing gets involved, we now kind of shift the paradigm from something less operational and more towards the dollars and cents. So that led to an assessment process that put a lot of emphasis on there being a low-cost provider. That seemed to be the key element that drove the train from an evaluation standpoint. And the domain expertise kind of took a back seat to whatever the folks were proposing as a cost to perform inspections. So the process went out. Damotech was not selected at the time. Fast forward the clock about a year, and the customer saw rack maintenance costs skyrocket. So that led to now Damotech being reintroduced into the process. So they went back to the drawing board. They looked at the way we had done things and the things that we had proposed, and they asked us to now look at a couple dozen locations that the current vendor had been looking at. So we were asked to re-inspect those locations and then provide a report on what our findings mentioned. Now, it goes without saying that we found considerable fewer deficiencies. Now, some folks may be scratching their head going, how is that a good thing? And I'm going to show you in a couple of slides why that matters, but it's all about having the expertise and the knowledge to know when something rises to the degree of priority where it has to be a damage that is addressed right away, or is it something that could be left alone and be addressed later on down the road. So key here, we were asked to come back in. We found fewer deficiencies. And what's notable is that those deficiencies that we did find were part of a deck of actionable information. There's no point in spending the dollars and the time and the resources to perform an inspection and then not be able to communicate the results of that inspection in a way that could be digested very quickly and that can have the steps and the actionable data that we need to make decisions and proceed. So not only did the report that we provided have a bunch of pie charts and graphs that identified kind of the key components that were at risk, we also provided a layout, as you can see in front of you, that demonstrated where the concentration of damage was taking place. And because we prioritized the damage from a unload, high, moderate, and low, the customer is able to quickly filter through those less important components and focus on the issues that were most critical to the safety of those particular locations. So I've been talking a lot about expertise and how knowledge is important. And we even had that quote from Albert Einstein at the beginning of the presentation, if you were able to join before we got going. But it all comes back to, are you 100 feet deep in expertise in your domain, or are you 10,000 feet deep? And we're proud to say that we have sufficient expertise on our bench to be able to tell when something rises to the condition of being critical. So this is a great example where there's a dent, a deformation on the front part of an upright, and where somebody else with less expertise might say, you know what, you got to replace that component or fix it. The thing about this particular example is that it's 14 feet in the air and there's only one beam level above it. So the bulk of the weight in that particular section is below the damage. Now, the novice person may not take that into consideration, but the experts that we have and the engineers that we have performing these inspections understand that in this case, it is not a high priority. It was labeled as a moderate priority. Same thing here. So this is a structural upright that was in the receiving area. You know, and for those that have been around a bit, you can see that there's you know, a star bracing pattern on this particular style of upright, and that these flat pieces of iron are bent. And to the untrained eye, this might seem to be a considerable issue to want to call out, because now we have a deformation on our bracing. And the answer is no, it's not that big of an issue, because to folks that understand these types of uprights and these type of bracing, the horizontal component we have here is more rigid and it acts in compression. So as the upright is compressing, it ensures that doesn't take place. Whereas these flat pieces of iron act in tension. So as the upright is, you know, moves with, whether it's a seismic event or because just the motion of working the upright, this will come and it'll straighten itself out as the upright, you know, behaves in a certain fashion. So it is perfectly fine for there to be a certain amount of bowing in this particular piece. And again, to the untrained person, we wouldn't necessarily be able to call that out the correct fashion. And finally, here we have another example of deformation to the front of an upright. Again, we were able to call this, as it ended up being a moderate, because we do have, you know, close to a 1/4 inch of deformation on the front. But the fact remains, we have a double posted situation here where we're able to say that this portion of the upright in the back is what's supporting the bulk of the load. And therefore, that small amount of deformation is not critical to where it would be called a high priority. Now, we're not calling these things out to toot our horn, but we're trying to demonstrate some clear examples of situations where an issue would be called out as high, therefore necessitating a replacement of a component when it's not necessary from an export's point of view. So we entitled the case study, How a Customer Saved $10 Million. And we're going to go through how that took place. As I just went through in excruciating detail, after Damotech was brought back into the fold to perform the inspections, we clearly demonstrated that there was a need to not spend as much money or to replace as many components. Therefore, less money spent on needless replacements is probably the first thing that brought this home. Second point, which is incredibly important, it goes to the kind of the say-do ratio that you want from a vendor. So we had 100% on-time reporting, and those needless replacements effectively meant that they were spending way too much on things they didn't need to. So we were able to bring a 70% reduction in per location spend as a result of the expertise that we brought to bear with our inspection process. And finally, we have a consultative approach. Now that's important for a couple of reasons. Now, the $10 million that we spoke about, you can see on the screen how we went from spending, or the customer went from spending $10,000 per store on replacement and maintenance costs to something that was just south of $3,000. So the amount of stores did not change, but the overall spend went from something that was close to $15 million to just over $4 million. So that was a considerable savings that the customer found and that we were able to bring to bear as part of our overall process. Now, and it doesn't stop there. But I spoke about having a consultative approach, and the reason why that's important, and the reason why I think as you vet a vendor as part of a particular process, I think it's important to not just stare at the problem that's in front of us and that caused this process to kind of morph into something else. I think it's important as part of the analysis and the assessment that you as customers bring to a particular issue is to ensure that that vendor also has the capabilities of providing other integrated solutions as part of their portfolio of offerings. If you recall before, I talked about how we had a layout that showed all the issues that were predominant in these store settings. What's also really neat about this, and I'm highlighting it here with my cursor, so I'm hoping you're able to see it. This is the receiving area where they had a bulk of the damage. So we were able to say, hey, Mr. Customer, I know that you hired us to perform an inspection. I know that we're sharing great information with you, but let's take it a step further. Let's see how we can ensure that in the future, these locations are not susceptible to future damage. So we went ahead and put a business case together for protecting these assets throughout their entire network. And that resulted in 110,000 DAMO guards, which is the column guard that you see here on the screen, being sold to the customer as part of an effort to ensure that they're proactive in preventing future damage to their assets. And our guarding solution, the way it's designed and the way it's anchored into the slab, ensures that there's a 10-fold less likelihood of replacement due to rack damage. And this is something that we undertook as part of a process. I mean, again, they had their sourcing get involved. They liked our design and they liked our price point, and we were able to affect this particular part of the solution in a span of 3 to 4 months. So if you think about that, manufacturing and shipping and having another party install all of these 110,000 guards over a 3 to 4 month time frame is somewhat incredible. So with that, I will hand things back over to John to talk about some of the key takeaways.
Thank you, Mark. So key takeaways from the time that Mark just spent with us, I'm going to go through 4 of them. The first one is really, are you overestimating or underestimating the severity of your rack damage? And the second point to that is, the only way you're really going to know is you need to hire an expert. And as Mark alluded to during the course of his speech, his talk with everyone, you may not be a national retail chain with 1,500 locations, but no matter the size and complexity of your organization, there still may be up to a 70% savings. So this is really applicable no matter who you are or what type of organization you work with. The third thing is that you want to be proactive. You want to spend a little bit money now on protection to save a lot of money down the line. And the fourth is you don't want to just choose a vendor. You want to choose a partner. You want to build a long-term relationship with someone who has deep expertise, who understands what you're going through, and can really work with you strategically to build a program and build a complete set of solutions around rack safety. And the other thing just to make mention of is to show, the level of our expertise and the challenges that we faced over, the 30 years in business. There's a reason why we have the bevy of clients you see at the bottom of the screen. Fortune 500 companies choose to work with Damotech because of our large team of in-house engineers who've conducted thousands of warehouse inspections across the country in different types of seismic zones. I have amassed a wealth of knowledge with different types of racking and racking systems, and they have a consistent and efficient data gathering process to make it very, very simple to conduct those reports, to do them timely, and then it's the same report across the entire organization. We're working with a standard set of data. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but for those of you that may not be aware, MODEX is taking place in Atlanta, March 28th to 31st. And if you're there, we'd love for you to stop by our booth, give you an opportunity to meet the team, have a chance to look at our wide variety of products, whether that's the rack repair solutions or protection products that Mark has spoken about. And it would also give you an opportunity to get a demo and play around with our software, our rack management software that we spoke about at the beginning of the presentation. And we're booth B7439 if you're in Atlanta. And lastly, we'll open it up to a Q&A right now. And if you'd like to know more, you can click on the QR code at the top right hand of your screen. And if you click on that, you can book a quick 15-minute discovery call with one of our experts, and we can take you through and assess how your level of warehouse safety is, and potentially provide you next steps about where you want to go with your rack safety journey. We'll open it up to questions. Mark and Derek.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jonathan. So very great presentation. So thanks for that. So we do have a couple of questions from some of our attendees. So we have a question from Ben, and he's asking, how can I improve the knowledge of my own employees in terms of identifying issues in the warehouse?
Ben, and I'll take that. John, I think that's a great question. We talked a little bit about this before, and I really want to highlight how the expertise that we spoke about, some of that can be very easily transferred down to the troops that are on the ground that are performing maybe some self-inspections. So at the beginning of the presentation, John did allude to very briefly about the fact that we do training. A big part of what we are, if you go to our website, look at the number of blogs that we have, there's a lot of information you can download and read about. But if you are looking for a more formal training on rack safety, we offer that in person and Zoom. I would say most often today, even as COVID starts being more in our rear view mirror than it has been in front of us, we do provide remote training as well. So I would encourage you to reach out to us, Ben, have us provide you an outline of the course material and a quote to provide that service. But certainly I'm confident that if you're concerned about maybe the lack of expertise of your folks on the ground, that we can make them that much better at what they do so that you will potentially save money on needless replacements, or, which I would argue is even more important, identify critical things that might be being left behind or overlooked currently in your process.
Thank you. So we have a second question from Ed, and he says, so I operate a single warehouse. How much could I expect to save on maintenance costs with Damotech inspections?
John, do you want to take that?
Mark, I'll let you answer that.
So I would say that certainly you're not going to save $10 million. No, and I say that jokingly. but I think it's tough to pinpoint a number. Certainly, if you are similar in your processes, you will save anywhere between 50 to 60% by having an expert come in and tell you what not to replace as part of your process. But also, conversely, as I talked about before, you also want to ensure that you are replacing the right things. So it's tough to pinpoint an exact number that you could save, Ed, as part of your warehouse operations. I would encourage you to reach out to us directly, and we could see how we can help improve whatever process or program you do have in place so that those savings can materialize over time.
Another question we have is from Norm. So he's asking, is it more cost effective to repair or replace, taking into consideration costs of an engineering review?
Do you want me to take that, John?
Sure, go ahead, Mark.
Sure. I think it depends. That's not a great answer. Folks never like when people say it depends. I would tell you that, and not because we happen to sell rack repairs as well, but if as part of an audit somebody says this component is an issue, it's a high priority or an unload, we need to address it. I would tell you that rack repair does have a value add that should be considered. That as a separate conversation to the engineering services that we provide, that a conversation should be had about what could be saved from rack repair versus replacement, whether it's the time that it takes to perform that replacement, whether it's the time that it takes to manufacture that replacement, or the fact that that replacement may very well get redamaged down the line. But I want to ensure people understand that our experts that go on the ground, that perform these audits, perform these inspections, they're not looking to sell Damotech repair stuff. All they're doing, their lane is very strictly, I'm an inspector, I'm a professional, I'm identifying what needs to be identified, and I'm reporting that to my customer. If there's an interest in finding out efficient ways to solve that problem, we'll happily let other divisions of our business step in, as we did in this example, and propose what I would call to be, value added solutions to ensure that you're saving money down the road. Long-winded answer, I appreciate, but I wanted to give it some airtime.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. One last question, maybe, Mark. So from Sean, so you mentioned OSHA during your presentation. So can Damotech help us in addressing OSHA concerns?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Sean. We mentioned OSHA before, and I pray that none of you ever have to have OSHA come in and either inspect or come in by virtue of an accident at your warehouse. It's horrible. It's being like being pulled through a keyhole. It's a horrible experience, but they're there for all the right reasons. And where we get involved with OSHA is, one, for those that don't know, we're one of the few rack safety vendors out there in North America that actually train OSHA inspectors on what to look for as part of their own audits. And two, we get involved when OSHA dictates, hey, Mr. Customer, you had an event. I want you to put a deliberate plan in place for how you're going to fix things and have a long-term solution to address your rack safety shortfalls. And that's where we shine, because we have done that a few times already with big national partners, where we built a rack safety program for them from the ground up that met the OSHA requirements within a time frame that was acceptable. And it put in motion a whole new culture of rack safety at this customer. So certainly we will not be the ones interacting with OSHA, but we will be the ones in the background ensuring that the customer that has been dinged by OSHA or that is on OSHA's radar is set up for success.
So there's a few other questions which are very specific. So I just want to mention that we'll be contacting you directly to get those answers to you. But that's it in terms of questions for you,
Awesome.
Mark and Jonathan. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks to all who took time out of your lunch break. If it was lunch, maybe you're having a late breakfast, but thank you for having joined us today and partaking in some of the great things that we learned from a great case study. Thanks, John.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.